guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be refinishing my solid hardwood dining room table. Alright, if you're new here, I'm Claire. I love to do these kind of DIY projects. I really love upcycling and refinishing furniture. I have a really popular video where I refinished a laminate like credenza, and that was just like surprisingly a really popular video for me, so I thought I was gonna do this today anyway. I might as well take you guys along and maybe someone out there can get something out of it. If you wanna see the credenza video, I will leave a link to it down below. A little bit of history. This table was purchased in the early 1960s by my grandfather. This is the dining room table that my mother sat around as a child, and it found its way to me through the family when I bought this house, so perfect. So back in those times, it was really common to buy furniture that was unfinished and that you would refinish yourself. So this is the stain that my grandfather chose, but I think it definitely needs some new life. It is pretty scratched and scraped and stained, and it just hasn't had a lot of love in a while. It is a really unique table. I think it's really cool. The benches are definitely back in style these days, so I thought I would just give it a nice little, super cheap, of course, update and show you guys what I'm gonna do. Also, I will leave a list of all of the products that I'm using in the description down below if you need any recommendations for brands or items that I like to use when I'm refinishing. So the first thing I'm going to start out with is my random orbital sander. Guys, this is my #1 favorite power tool that ever existed, and that is the God's honest truth. I love this thing. If you are going to be refinishing furniture, you need one of these. It will make your life a lot easier, and they're not very expensive. I'm using a couple different types of sandpaper here. The number on the back of the sandpaper is called the grit, and the lower the number, the like grittier it is. So I'm gonna start with, I think I started with a 60 or an 80, right around there. And it's not going to make the surface real smooth, but it is gonna do a better job of getting all of this polyurethane off. The layer was extremely thick, and it depends on the project you're doing. You could use a sanding block if you just wanted to sand it by hand. For this, I swear that would not have been possible. It was so thick, I had to press really hard, and it took a lot of elbow grease. So this power tool was necessary for this project, but if you've got something smaller that maybe just has a light stain on it, or if you're going to paint it instead of stain it, you can get away with just using a sanding block. And later, I'm going to come in with that finer grit of sandpaper in the 150s. I believe I used a 150 or a 180, and that's really gonna smooth out the surface. Now, this seriously took a lot of hard work to get this wood to come out, but eventually it did, and I just kept going, kept chipping away at it throughout the day until I uncovered this beautiful wood on the bottom. It's also worth noting that this can get a little bit dusty, so if you are really having to refinish a huge piece like this, get a mask. I'm using a handmade one because masks are a little bit scarce right now. And the benches had, it seemed like, twice the layer of the tabletop, so it took me a really long time, but I finally got them done, and then I'm just gonna go right over the top with that 150 sandpaper, and that's just gonna make everything nice and smooth. We definitely, we don't want it to be bumpy or harsh. So now, since I'm painting the legs, I'm just gonna go over it real quick with my sander. I don't need to strip it down like I did with the top, thank goodness. And this part is totally not necessary, but we have an air compressor, so why not use it? My husband Gianni is just blowing all of the dust off of it. There has been a lot of sanding today, so I definitely want to make sure everything's as smooth as possible. So he blew it off with the air, and now I'm just going over it with a damp rag to get any cobwebs, any dust, any bits of anything off there. Now I'm going to be using this primer. This is for all surfaces, and my little handy dandy mini roller. I don't always use a primer, especially because the paint I'm using has a primer built in. However, this wood is so dark, and also there's a lot of layers of crap on there. I really wanted to make sure that this was gonna stick for the longest time that it can. I don't want it to chip, I don't want it to peel, so I decided to just put in the extra little layer of a nice, good primer, and hopefully it will extend the life of these legs. And now that everything is primed, I am losing daylight and my hands are about to fall off at this point from all that sanding. So I called it a night. Now here I am the next day. This is the paint I'm using. It is a high gloss paint. You don't have to get paint that's specifically for cabinets, doors, and trim, but we always have a gallon of this laying around for any time we need to touch like our trim or anything like that up. It's just like a thing we always have. So since we already had it, it worked out great. I noticed right away I was going to need more than one coat. Putting white over such a dark wood, I knew it would take like a little bit of paint to make that happen. But just make sure when you're picking out paint for furniture that you go for a high gloss because you want to make it easy to clean, and durability is the name of the game for sure when it comes to furniture. And of course, if you happen to have any children around, I always like to try to get my kids involved in some way. The reason that I like to do this kind of stuff is because my dad did it with me. So if I want them to grow up and to be able to refinish things and use power tools with confidence, they're gonna have to learn it from somebody. So as I mentioned before, it definitely needed just one more coat. It was just hard covering that dark wood, but the second coat did the trick, so easy enough. And now we are going to work on these tops. I just can't even believe how good they turned out. I did the painting on the bottom first so that if any paint were to get on the wooden surface, we could just sand that right off before staining it. And now I am going over it with a wet rag. I just want to make sure, again, that we get any dust off there. We want this to be nice and smooth. We don't want any dusty chunks messing up our stain. This is the stain I'm going to use. We actually used it for our mantle, and I thought it would be lovely if they matched. The color I chose is Golden Oak, and people have different methods of how they like to apply stain. I like to do it just with a cloth, and I just kind of put it on there. I think I just use multiple methods. Sometimes I go with the grain, sometimes I go in little circles. You'll kind of just be able to see once you get your hands in kind of what the wood is going to do with the stain. And while you can't unstain it, you can always go in and add more to try to even it out. If you find some streaks in there or some spots where you were a little bit heavy, you can just go in with your cloth again and just sort of even it out. And of course, you have control how dark this is going to be. You can put more than one layer of stain. Just wait a couple hours between and you can make it darker. And you really have a lot to work with. But I decided I really liked this the way that it was. It was nice and light. And of course, we wanted it to match the mantle. So this worked out really well. I just needed one quick, easy coat. And you're going to want to let that dry for a pretty long time. You really want to let that wood soak all of that in. And of course, you want to give it time to know what it's going to look like. You definitely don't want to seal it before you know what it should look like. All right, time to seal this bad boy. I'm using this polyurethane. I like a satin finish. This table previously had a very glossy, high shine finish, and I didn't really like it. I think it really showed all the imperfections. And I like a satin because it's still soft without being shiny. And you'll notice that I put it in a box because I've always found it a little bit like a strain on my hand to hold a can. So I just poured it into a box and I'm using just long strokes with the grain. It kind of looks like glue when it's on there. It's kind of thick and white, and don't worry, it will dry clear. So you just want to put a nice thick layer of this on. And this is really stinky and not good to breathe in. So try to do this outside. If you have to do it inside, you need to wear some sort of protection with a filter over your mouth or nose. And you really gotta let this dry too. I always heard, I don't even know if it's true, that you gotta leave it until it's not really stinky anymore. And then you can bring it in your house, and even then you should wait a couple days before you eat at it or start putting things on it. And there you go. Here it is in our home. It's crazy that this was built, you know, almost the same year that this house was built. So I think they belong together, and I'm really happy with it. All right, you guys, I really could not be happier with how this table turned out. I kept walking by and just taking a moment to stare at it. I can't believe that this was underneath there. I knew that it would look good. I just didn't know it would be this good. It's exactly what I wanted. I think it has tons of character. It looks old, but not too old. You know, I don't think I would ever guess that this was 60 years old if I walked into someone's home. I think it looks very expensive, and just the quality of it is incredible, and they really just don't make them like they used to, right? I will say that this project was one of the most time-consuming furniture refinishings I have ever done. My grandparents really wanted that to stay that color, and I don't know if it was them or maybe my uncle, who had the table for a while after them, put the thickest layer of polyurethane on especially the benches, that like I couldn't hardly move my hands the whole next day after refinishing them or just sanding it off, because oh my gosh, just holding that sander for like, I don't know, 8 hours, 7 or 8 hours of sanding just to get the tops fresh and clean. And I know there's probably a tool that would be more powerful or better, but I'm all about working with what you got, and that took a lot of elbow grease. So I feel like they're up there just like laughing at me trying to remove the ridiculous poly layer on top of these surfaces. But I'm really proud of myself. I think I made something that's really going to fit in with my home and grow old with me, and maybe one day my grandchildren will be sanding it down and doing something different. Of course, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of my table transformation. Obviously, I'm not like a professional carpenter or woodworker. I'm just a regular human who likes to do this kind of stuff. So don't be so intimidated if you want to give it a try. If it's just like a piece you found at the Goodwill, or like, I'm not gonna lie, I've refinished things I found for free on the side of the road. There is always more life that you can give to lots of pieces of furniture, and you should definitely give it a try. So I hope this inspired you to get going on any of the projects that you want to do in your own home. And yeah, come back for more mom stuff, lady stuff, and life stuff. And I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!